They smile at you during meetings while undermining your projects behind closed doors. They offer help with one hand while sabotaging your reputation with the other. They speak in caring tones while slowly isolating you from allies, resources, opportunities. And the worst part? You don't see it happening until it's too late, until you're standing alone, confused, wondering how someone you trusted could orchestrate your downfall so methodically, so invisibly. This is the world of manipulation, and it's everywhere around you right now. In your workplace, your relationships, your social circles, even in your own family. Because manipulation isn't just the domain of criminals or sociopaths. It's the hidden language of power that most people speak fluently without you ever realizing they're doing it. But 500 years ago, one man decoded this language completely. Niccolo Machiavelli didn't just study manipulation. He dissected it like a surgeon, exposing every nerve, every pressure point, every psychological trigger that manipulators use to control their victims. And what he discovered wasn't just how manipulation works. He discovered how to make yourself immune to it. See, most people think Machiavelli was evil. They think he taught rulers to be cruel, dishonest, ruthless. But that's not what he was doing. He was doing something far more valuable. He was revealing the game that powerful people had been playing in secret for centuries. He was pulling back the curtain on the psychological warfare that happens every single day, in every interaction, between people who want power and people who don't even know they're being played. And once you understand his strategies, once you can see manipulation the way Machiavelli saw it, something incredible happens. You become untouchable, not because you become manipulative yourself, but because you become immune to manipulation. You see it coming before it lands. You recognize the patterns before they trap you. You identify the psychological tactics before they rewire your thinking. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how this works. How to use Machiavelli's 500-year-old insights to dismantle modern manipulation before it destroys your career, your relationships, your peace of mind. Because understanding manipulation isn't about becoming a manipulator. It's about never being manipulated again. Let me tell you about Sarah, brilliant marketing executive, 10 years of experience, respected by her team, trusted by her clients. She thought she had job security. She thought she understood office politics. Then David joined the company as the new department head. Charming guy, always complimenting her work in meetings, always asking for her input on major decisions, always making her feel valued, included, essential to the team's success. But something strange started happening. Projects she'd been leading for months suddenly got reassigned to other team members. Clients she'd built, relationships with over years, began requesting different account managers. Her ideas were being presented in meetings by colleagues who somehow forgot to mention they originated from her. And every time she brought up these concerns, David would listen with such empathy, such understanding. He'd promise to look into it. He'd assure her that her contributions were valued. He'd make her feel like she was being paranoid, oversensitive, imagining problems that didn't exist. 6 months later, Sarah was let go. Budget cuts, they said. Her position was being eliminated. David delivered the news personally, with such genuine sadness in his voice, such regret that the company was losing someone so talented, such hope that she'd find something even better suited to her skills. What Sarah didn't realize until months later was that she'd been systematically dismantled. Every compliment David gave her in meetings was calculated to make her lower her guard. Every request for her input was designed to extract her best ideas. Every reassurance about her job security was meant to keep her from networking, from updating her resume, from preparing for what was coming. David hadn't just taken her job, he'd made her complicit in losing it. This is what modern manipulation looks like. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wear a villain's mask. It comes disguised as support, as friendship, as collaboration. It speaks your language. It validates your feelings. It makes you feel understood, appreciated, safe. All while slowly, methodically, destroying your position from the inside out. And the reason it works so effectively is because most people are playing by the wrong rules. They're playing the game of trust, honesty, good faith. They assume that others operate with the same moral framework they do. They believe that treating people well will inspire others to treat them well in return. They think that competence, loyalty, and hard work will be rewarded with security and advancement. But manipulators aren't playing that game. They're playing a completely different game with completely different rules. A game where your trust becomes their weapon, where your honesty becomes their intelligence, where your good faith becomes their advantage. They understand something that you don't. Power isn't distributed fairly based on merit. It's taken strategically by those who understand how to take it. Machiavelli understood this 5 centuries ago. He watched rulers rise and fall, not based on their virtue or their competence, but based on their ability to navigate the hidden currents of power. He saw that the world was divided into 2 types of people: those who understood the game of manipulation and those who were being manipulated by it. And he realized that the only way to protect yourself from the first group was to understand exactly how they operated. But here's what makes Machiavelli's approach so powerful for us today. He wasn't just studying political manipulation between kings and princes. He was studying human psychology itself, the fundamental drives, fears, and vulnerabilities that make people susceptible to control, the cognitive biases that manipulators exploit, the emotional triggers they pull, the social dynamics they weaponize. These patterns haven't changed. A manipulator in a Renaissance court used the same psychological tactics that a manipulator in your office uses today. They create artificial scarcity to make you compete for their attention. They offer intermittent validation to keep you emotionally dependent. They position themselves as your protector while creating the threats you need protection from. They make you feel special, chosen, understood, while systematically isolating you from other sources of support and information. The techniques are identical. The psychology is identical. The outcomes are identical. The only thing that's changed is the setting. Instead of palace intrigue, we have corporate politics. Instead of royal succession, we have career advancement. Instead of territorial conquest, we have market domination. But the manipulation playbook remains exactly the same. And that's your advantage. Because once you understand the playbook, once you can recognize the patterns, once you know what to look for, manipulation loses its power over you. You stop being the mark and start being the observer. You stop being the victim and start being the strategist. You stop reacting to their moves and start anticipating them. This isn't about becoming cynical. It's not about assuming everyone is trying to manipulate you. It's about developing what Machiavelli called discernment, the ability to see people clearly without the distortion of wishful thinking or naive assumptions. The skill of recognizing when someone's actions don't align with their words. The wisdom to understand that not everyone who smiles at you wishes you well. Because here's the brutal truth that Machiavelli discovered and that most people refuse to accept. There are individuals in this world who view other people not as fellow human beings with inherent worth and dignity, but as resources to be exploited, tools to be used, obstacles to be removed, and they're incredibly skilled at hiding this perspective behind masks of charm, concern, and collaboration. They've studied your psychology just as carefully as Machiavelli studied theirs. They know which emotional buttons to push to make you compliant. They understand which fears to activate to make you dependent. They recognize which desires to promise to make you hopeful. They're playing a sophisticated psychological game, and most of their targets don't even realize the game is happening. But You're about to realize it. You're about to see through the mask. You're about to understand not just what manipulation looks like, but how it thinks, how it plans, how it executes its strategies. And once you have that understanding, once you can see the game board clearly, everything changes. The person who seemed so supportive suddenly looks calculating. The offer that seemed so generous suddenly appears strategic. The crisis that seemed so urgent suddenly feels manufactured. The relationship that seemed so genuine suddenly reveals itself as transactional. Not because you've become paranoid, but because you've become perceptive. This is where Machiavelli's genius becomes your shield. Because he didn't just observe manipulation from the outside, he understood it from the inside. He knew that every manipulator, no matter how sophisticated, follows predictable patterns. They can't help themselves. It's like a signature they leave on every interaction, every relationship, every power play they orchestrate. And once you learn to read that signature, once you recognize those patterns, you gain something manipulators fear more than anything else: immunity. You become the one person in the room they can't touch, not because you're stronger or smarter or more ruthless, but because you see them coming before they arrive. Let me show you what I mean. Every master manipulator uses what Machiavelli called the cultivation strategy. They don't attack you directly. They don't announce their intentions. Instead, they plant seeds. Small actions, seemingly innocent gestures, tiny favors that slowly reshape how you see them and how you see yourself in relation to them. Think about David from Sarah's story. He didn't walk into that office and immediately start sabotaging her projects. That would have been obvious. Instead, he cultivated her trust over months. Each compliment was a seed planted to make her more receptive to his influence. Each request for advice was designed to make her feel valued while extracting intelligence about her methods, her relationships, her vulnerabilities. But here's what Sarah didn't see, and what Machiavelli would have spotted immediately. David's compliments were never about her character or her intrinsic worth. They were always about her utility to him. He praised her analytical skills because he needed her analysis. He valued her client relationships because he wanted access to those clients. He appreciated her team leadership because he was studying how to replace her leadership with his own. A genuine ally compliments who you are. A manipulator compliments what you can do for them. And once you understand this distinction, once you start listening for it in every interaction, you begin to see manipulation everywhere. In the boss who only praises you when they need you to work late. In the colleague who suddenly becomes friendly right before performance reviews. In the friend who shows interest in your life only when they need a favor. Machiavelli called this the mirror test. Hold up a mirror to someone's attention and see what reflects back. Are they seeing you, or are they seeing themselves? Are they interested in your well-being, or in what your well-being can provide for them? The manipulator's mirror always reflects their own needs, their own agenda, their own desires projected onto your life. But cultivation is just the beginning. Once they've established trust, once they've made you believe they're on your side, manipulators move to what Machiavelli identified as the dependency phase. They don't just want your trust, they want your need. They want to become so essential to your success, your security, your happiness, that the thought of losing them terrifies you. Watch how this unfolds. The manipulator starts solving problems in your life, not because they care about your problems, but because each solution creates a debt. Each favor generates obligation. Each rescue establishes their importance in your world. They become your go-to person for advice, for support, for validation. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you stop trusting your own judgment and start depending on theirs. This is psychological warfare at its most subtle. They're not attacking your decision-making ability directly. They're making their decision-making ability seem superior by comparison. Every time you face a challenge, They're there with the perfect solution. Every time you feel uncertain, they provide clarity. Every time you doubt yourself, they offer reassurance. Until you begin to believe that you can't handle difficulties without them. Sarah experienced this perfectly. Every time she had a concern about her projects or her role, David was there to address it. He became her translator for office politics, her interpreter of management decisions, her guide through workplace challenges. She thought he was helping her navigate the company. What he was actually doing was making her dependent on his navigation. Because when someone becomes your guide, they control where you go. And here's the most insidious part. Dependency doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like support. It feels like having someone in your corner. It feels like being understood and cared for. The emotional experience is positive, even while the power dynamic is being systematically destroyed. You feel grateful to your manipulator, even as they're positioning themselves to betray you. Machiavelli saw this pattern repeat endlessly in the courts and political circles of his time. Advisors who made princes dependent on their counsel then used that dependency to control policy. Allies who provided essential services then leveraged those services to extract concessions. Friends who offered protection then defined what protection meant and what it cost. The dependency trap works because it exploits a fundamental human need, the desire for security. We all want to feel safe, supported, understood. We all want to believe that someone has our back, and manipulators are experts at positioning themselves as that someone. They become your security blanket, your safety net, your insurance policy against an uncertain world. But security provided by a manipulator isn't security at all. It's control disguised as care. Because the moment you truly need that security, the moment you're most vulnerable, they reveal the price, and the price is always higher than you expected to pay. This is where Machiavelli's third pattern emerges, the isolation strategy. Once they've cultivated your trust and established your dependency, manipulators begin systematically separating you from other sources of support, information, and perspective. Not obviously, not dramatically, but steadily, carefully, strategically. They plant doubts about your other relationships. They question the motives of your allies. They highlight the flaws in your support network. They position themselves as the only person who truly understands you, truly supports you, truly has your best interests at heart. Everyone else becomes suspect. Everyone else becomes potentially disloyal. Everyone else becomes a threat to the special relationship you have with your manipulator. Sarah experienced this too. David would make subtle comments about her colleagues. Nothing overtly negative, just observations that made her question their loyalty. He'd mention how someone had spoken about her in a meeting she hadn't attended. He'd share concerns about whether certain team members were really committed to her success. He'd express worry that she was too trusting, too generous, too willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. Each comment was like a small poison, slowly eroding her confidence in her other relationships. And as her trust in others diminished, her reliance on David increased. He became not just her ally, but her only ally. Not just her source of information, but her filter for all information. Not just her supporter, but her sole interpreter of who else could be trusted. This isolation serves multiple purposes for the manipulator. It eliminates witnesses to their behavior. It removes alternative perspectives that might reveal their true intentions. It prevents their target from seeking advice or validation from others who might see through the manipulation. And it creates a closed information loop where the manipulator controls not just what their target knows, but how their target thinks about what they know. Machiavelli understood that isolation was perhaps the most crucial element of successful manipulation. Because a person surrounded by genuine allies is nearly impossible to manipulate. They have too many sources of feedback, too many perspectives, too many people who will notice when something doesn't seem right. But a person who has been systematically isolated becomes infinitely more vulnerable. Their reality becomes whatever their manipulator tells them it is. And this is where most people make their fatal mistake. They think isolation means being physically alone, but psychological isolation is far more subtle and far more effective. You can be surrounded by people and still be completely isolated if those people aren't providing genuine perspective, honest feedback, or independent validation of your experiences. The manipulator doesn't need to physically separate you from others. They just need to become your primary source of interpretation for what others mean, what others want, what others are really thinking. They become the lens through which you see every other relationship. And gradually, that lens becomes so distorted that you can't see clearly anymore. This is when the manipulator moves to their final phase, what Machiavelli called the harvest. They've cultivated your trust, established your dependency, and achieved your isolation. Now they collect the benefits of their investment. They extract what they want from you, whether that's your resources, your position, your influence, or simply your compliance with their agenda. But here's what makes this phase so devastating. You participate in your own destruction. Because by this point, you've been so thoroughly conditioned to see their success as your success, their needs as your needs, their perspective as reality itself, that you actively help them take what they want from you. You think you're being loyal. You think you're being supportive. You think you're being a good friend, colleague, or partner. You hand over information they can use against you. You make introductions they can exploit. You provide access they can leverage. You defend them to others who try to warn you. You become their advocate, their accomplice, their weapon against yourself. And you do it willingly, gladly, because you believe you're doing it for someone who cares about you. This is the true horror of sophisticated manipulation. It doesn't just take what you have. It makes you complicit in the taking. It doesn't just betray your trust. It turns your trust into a tool of betrayal. It doesn't just harm you. It makes you an agent of your own harm. But Machiavelli didn't just identify these patterns to frighten people. He identified them to liberate people. Because once you understand how manipulation works, once you can see these phases unfolding, once you recognize the signs and signals, you gain the power to protect yourself. Not by becoming paranoid or cynical, but by becoming discerning, by learning to distinguish between genuine care and strategic cultivation, between authentic support and manufactured dependency, between healthy connection and calculated isolation. The key is learning to see manipulation not as it presents itself, but as it actually operates. Not through the mask it wears, but through the patterns it follows. Not through the emotions it generates, but through the outcomes it produces.